So I'm Gigi. I work for What Three Words, and I'm a white woman in my late 20s. I'm wearing a Bordeaux top and some silver earrings, and I have long and blonde hair.
I'm Gavin Neat. I'm the CEO and founder of Neatbox, but I'm 52 years old. I've got a little bit of a goatee beard and a big green plant behind me, and long COVID hair. In other words, hair that's just way too long. It's about time I had a haircut.
Jonathan Hassel. Yeah, I've been working in this area for 20 years now, just over. And it all started for me. Two things happened at the same time. I started working at the BBC. My boss literally came to me the first week and said, we've been brilliant at this at the BBC for years, you know, captioning on TV, signing, all of these sorts of things. I've just had a report that says we're awful catering for the needs of people with disabilities online. And it's your job to try and make sure that this changes. And I took it as a huge opportunity because around about the same time, my nephew had been born. He was born with spina bifida. So he uses a wheelchair. He's slightly autistic. He has a slight learning difficulty. I think it's that combination of somebody asking you a real kind of interesting challenge. I've always found accessibility one of the most intellectually stimulating things that I've ever sort of come across, because it's all about trying to put myself in the shoes of someone who isn't me. There's actually nothing more interesting. Gigi, your learnings, absolutely, you know, you learn absolutely every single day in this. But it was that combination of that and having that personal link. That's what kicked me off.
1986, I joined the Royal Military Police, the RAF Police, and I was a dog trainer, a dog handler until 1996 when I joined Guide Dogs for the Blind. Guide Dogs for the Blind was my dream job. I became a mobility instructor. It was a 3-year degree course. About 2003, well, 1999, I qualified as a dog trainer, mobility instructor. 2003, somebody said to me, there was this brilliant stuff, GPS, that visually impaired people are going to use more and more. And they had big laptop that was attached to them and then things on their shoulders, and they could work out where they were. But then 2006, somebody turned up, or 2005, somebody turned up to train with a guide dog with me, and they had a Nokia N95. And the Nokia N95 was arguably Nokia's last decent phone. It's the last slide phone, and that had speech software on it. 2006, iPhone 2S came along and it had voiceover. And I had all my clients turning up to train with guide dogs, and they were all using their phones to communicate, reading their emails. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then in 2009, I invented the world's first pedestrian crossing operated by smartphones, when I recognized that people at pedestrian crossing couldn't press buttons. And here's a great example. I'm holding up a book here, which is me back when I was a guide dog mobility instructor, pointing out to the camera that it's impossible to get to the pole and press the button if it's too far away from you. So I invented a way of the phone communicating with the pedestrian crossing. That led to Welcome, which is a system whereby disabled people can inform customer service teams before they walk through the door as to what their needs are, which is where I am. That's me.
When it comes to technology, that we're not leaving people behind, like that idea for me is quite just something I'm really against, basically. And so in terms of how I got into accessibility with What Three Words, actually it was a very specific event. I went to this venue for a conference that I was giving. That was maybe like a couple years ago. And then I got there and I sort of put the address on Citymapper, and I got there, but I got to the back of the building, which was a huge building that took, you know, a couple of blocks. And I got to the back entrance and it said loading bay, no customer entrance. So I was like, okay, where do I go now? Like, I asked around, they were like, yeah, no, this is not the entrance, you have to go all the way around. So I was like, okay, I was late for my presentation. So I sort of ran back to the main consumer entrance. There were steps along the way, and got there a bit late, but I was fine. And that got me thinking, you know what, like, this is not the experience that everyone would have, and this is not okay. And I work for a company that has a product that would solve this problem. So let's start looking into accessibility. Let's start looking into how What Three Words can be used by venues so that this doesn't happen and people get directed to the exact step-free entrance from the first try. So that's how it started. And then we started looking at not only how can what through be helpful for people with disabilities, but also what do we need to do ourselves to make sure that we are accessible and our products are accessible for people with disabilities. And that snowballed into a huge amount of beautiful learnings that have come out of that, for sure.
My job role is to look after the assistive technology that's coming into the firm. So I make sure that, first of all, we have the best technology available to our staff, but also have a really good understanding as to what's out in the market, what's coming next, just to make sure that we're up and running and keep people able to work and engaged. That's myself. And how did I start? I think that was the next question, wasn't it?
Yeah, why? I want to know.
So I think you probably find, like a lot of people in the industry, it's complete and utter accident. You'll just be, you'll start off sitting there, and it's almost like that light bulb moment where you just think, accessibility, where does that fit in, and how can I get involved? So I was one of those people. I work in IT. So I used to look after a lot of the internal firm services, so like travel booking and things like that. And I just happened to be walking the floor, and there was a couple of the managers on the floor scratching their head looking at this laptop, and I'm thinking, what are they doing? And they said, does anybody know anything about screen readers? And I honestly had no idea at all, but I just thought that sounds really interesting. Can I have a look? And obviously then it just, the rest of it came in from there. So that was around about 5 years ago now. It's almost just the tip of the iceberg when you start looking at things like screen readers and how people work slightly differently. And that's where my interest has come in.
How do you see yourself, set the goal for yourself? What is your goal in terms of few years ahead? Where do you want to be in the field of accessibility?
My goal is to be part of the empowerment of the individual. I want to empower disabled people to be the ones that dictate the world that they live in. And that means that if they are empowered to know how to use some tech that helps them get a job, that gets them into a position, well, we are going to design what we see. And if we are the people, if the people who are designing, the people who are employed by Facebook, the people employed by Google and PwC and the corner shop and whoever it is, they're disabled people, they will provide services. They will design for disabled people. So we need to move away from, and we will move away from, if we have empowerment as the goal here, we will move away from designing for people and realize that they are part of the design process themselves. So it's the empowerment of the individual through technology and accessible technology that if we can achieve that in my lifetime, I'll be a very happy bunny. So
my goal is that the word accessibility doesn't exist, and that it's just called product design, really. Everything that I've done in the 20-year career that I've had in this area has been to try and enable people to be empowered to get this right. I want to move the dial from people being nervous about this, people thinking that it's all about sort of getting their product tested and being really, really nervous that it's going to come back and tell them that they got everything wrong, to something where it's just a fundamental part of how people are trained, and that this is just what design is, what coding is.
Probably for me, my goal is more around that bite-sized training, and just making it simplified and not sort of overdressing it too much, because I think people get very, very confused when you start throwing WCAG standards out them and saying you must meet this and you must do that. Actually making sure that people can relate to it is probably the easiest thing I found.
That was exactly what I was going to say, actually, Chris. Just I think I have two points there to add or to say. One is just making accessibility simple, and I think to your point, Chris, is just we might know WCAG guidelines well, right? But we can't expect everyone and every designer and every developer to know that as well, right? We just need to make it as simple as possible for them to go, okay, so if I'm a designer, these are the 5 things that I need to take into consideration. And it goes back to what you were saying, Jonathan, is like, it's just part of design, it's just part of development. It's not this extra thing that you need to think about. But I think the simpler we make it, the more chances we have for people to implement it into their day-to-day.
If that is our goal, that we want to make things simpler and usable, and remove the word accessibility itself, but it's a necessity to the design. Where do we start from?
If you follow influencers and advocates on Twitter and on LinkedIn, connect with people and read what they're saying on a daily basis, you're not going to learn it from a book. Yes, you can go away and read books on this, but immerse yourself into the world of the people out there who are the movers and the shakers, the advocates, the people who have got the most integrity and respect out there. And I'm very happy to say that they're on this call. A lot of them are on this call.
Where I've learned the most, it's by talking to people like you guys. I've talked to Chris before. I've talked, I just really like, honestly, sending a message on LinkedIn and going, hey, I'm really interested to find out what you're doing at your organization about accessibility. Do you have half an hour to talk? And what's really great about the accessibility world is people are actually really, usually most of the time, really happy to talk to you and tell you about what they're doing. And it's a very collaborative environment.
But I think the best influencers are people with disabilities themselves, really. So it's actually, the reason why, why I think I'm an influencer is because I listen to loads of people who told me how it was for them. WCAG is kind of dry. Take it from me as somebody who's written standards. Writing standards is really, really difficult. And it almost kind of like sucks the life out of you, because they're all, you almost like have to think like a lawyer. And I was forever being told I wasn't allowed to put examples in, and I wasn't able to put stories in. And I was kind of like, that's the reason why I work in this industry. My whole thing is stories about people that I've met who had something to tell me, because if I actually asked the right question, I would find out that the world is a much bigger place than it was. I mean, Gavin, I'm guessing when you were coming up with that ability for blind people to get across the road on that pedestrian crossing, your degree of success in that was, could they get over the crossing? Who cares about everyone else? You had to listen to them, what they needed, what would work for them, what wouldn't work for them. And actually, I mean, I kind of like simplicity, but I like reality better. So the thing that I've always done is to try and put the two together. Give people like 5 things that are the top things that they could do. But some of my best friends in the industry are the people who actually delve deep into complexity. We spent a while a few years ago trying to create some guidelines for people who are autistic. The people who WCAG said were too complicated to try and work out how to deal with, because it's a spectrum, so nobody agrees with each other. So how do you do guidelines for that? Whilst other people sort of like run away from things like that, we run towards it, because for me, there is something deeply kind of human about how do we take all of this diversity and try and help people to understand how we could create something that would work for all of these different people, even if all of these different people happen to call themselves autistic on that particular thing. So I think for me, I like simplicity. But if somebody comes along and says, yeah, actually, I have that impairment and what they've said is wrong, it's not, they haven't met my needs, I want to listen to them most, so that I can kind of deeply understand this stuff.
Come back on that just quickly.
Yeah, Gavin.
When you were talking about how does a visually impaired person cross the road, well, when I started looking at that, I was then, right, okay, I know how to fix it for blind people. Brilliant. But then when I looked into it in more detail, I went, well, okay, now I know that. But what if somebody's in a wheelchair? What if somebody is a power chair user? What if somebody has OCD and doesn't want to press the button, or wants to repeatedly press the button? And I started realizing that just knowing one blind person, or indeed me knowing 500 blind people, wasn't enough. I needed to find a way of designing for absolutely everybody. So I would say, if you're wanting to know how to design a product, don't just ask one particular group of people. There is a whole myriad of different people who are all going to use the same thing, and they will all need you to have an understanding of their need as well.
Over the last 2 years, I would say spoken to maybe 400, 500 people with blindness, found very similar views, but it's also fascinating to see that they're so different from each other. They have very different requirements, and there is no one product which is probably going to solve all of their problems. So of course, then you need a portfolio of products to address that. And it's also about, I think, talking to a lot of people, but at the same time, it's a little on the side of somebody who's designing the product or managing the technology. I think it can be a little overwhelming. So you have the rules and regulations on one side which govern you, but they're probably not also, how do we make sure that the rules and regulations are accountable for all the different types of disabilities or different people with different needs?
One of the things that I kind of thought about was sometimes we can design these products to try and get around the problem. And what happens is you obviously then overdevelop something, you don't follow the standards because you're on a limited time, you've got people behind you that really need this product, when actually what you should be doing is removing the problem to start with. So you're not actually designing to go around it, you're going straight through it. And maybe that's sometimes where the option is. And I find generally when we're going through product development and product design, getting people in right at the beginning when you're actually looking at what the issue is or what the problem is or what you're trying to solve actually cuts a lot of that out. It makes things a lot simpler. You don't need to overdevelop something. You don't need to have a lot of these fancy features that come into these apps. Really not needed at all. It's just that somebody fancied doing that on that day without the right people in the room to talk it through on. So I think for us, it goes back to simplicity. But I think also back to obviously what Gavin and Jonathan were saying is following people, really immersing yourself in it, and ask as many questions as you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I've done a lot of international stuff. You know, I think the kind of bad news to answer your question is that I don't think everybody's needs are actually there in the standards at the moment. The kind of key thing really is to try and enable all of that complexity to be understood. So, you know, to try and kind of conflate two things together. For me, simplicity is breaking things down by job role. So to, you know, Chris's point, you know, there is miles more than 5 things for, you know, for people to do in accessibility. But actually, if you ask me what are the 5 things for a content author doing stuff in Twitter to do, or the 5 things for somebody making a mobile app who happens to be a developer, the 5 things for a product manager to do, the 5 things for somebody actually procuring products for an organization, those are actually more doable asks, if you like, and actually more stable things.
Picking up on that, 5 things, the most important things maybe somebody is doing, and not be overwhelmed with the standards, is speaking to somebody or testing the product. Chris said, yeah, bring the actual users in the beginning of the process, make them include them in the process of the design. And that's kind of my question as well, that how important then, if rules are overwhelming, how important does auditing become in that process?
Yeah, if I can give a quick example there, I think it's super important. Like you know, you can try to make your website or product, you know, compliant with all the WCAG guidelines and everything, all of the guidelines that exist, and you're still going to be missing a big part of it, which is the user experience that of someone with a disability and different types of disabilities, right? To go back to what we were saying, and how they're going to experience your product. And I have a very quick example that I always like to use because I think it highlights that. I mean, we were doing, I was with a designer in our team, and we were doing an interview with one of our users who is blind. And we asked him, can you please enter a what three words address? So just for context, a what three words address is always in the format of word dot word dot word. So it's 3 words separated by 2 dots. And so he started typing the 3-word address with just, word, space, word, space, word, right? Because we had never told him that there was dots, and he's never seen that there's dots. And we had never, we've done, we have like empathy-led teams, right? In terms of accessibility, we've done all of the automated tests. We've done, we're working on our WCAG accessibility guidelines, compliance, etc., etc. But this is something we would have never picked up if it wasn't, through user testing.
If a founder member had been blind, that would never have been a question, because they would have just said, oh no, it has to be. They would have been using VoiceOver as part of the design process. And they'd have gone, oh, wait a second, I can't, it's reading out the wrong thing here. So it doesn't mean that you need to employ just disabled people, but I think increasingly larger companies will have more disabled people.
From my perspective, yeah, I mean, I think audits are miles overrated. So let's be a little controversial here for a moment. So yeah, so we try not to do audits in hassle inclusion because in general, what tends to happen in an audit is it gives you an incredibly long document that makes people demoralized when they receive it. People, I want to break the idea that the word after accessibility is audits or even testing, because that's just hitting people for getting things wrong. And I just don't think that's helpful. So hassle inclusion. So we do, so this is the type of testing that we do. So the closest thing that we get to a normal sort of WCAG test. So the problem with the WCAG test is that you mythologize the tester. So basically what you do is you give them your product, they go away for 2 weeks and give you something that makes you cry. You don't see any of the process. For them to communicate with you, they need to kind of like write screens, loads of documentation. It's awful. We have something we call a live audit, where we literally audit. So we bring our expert in front of people like this, and we test the product in front of the people who are creating the product. And we demonstrate the sort of experience that people with different disabilities would have. And we demonstrate how we would test it. We love user testing with people with disabilities. We do a lot of that to help organizations really understand this stuff. But we push beyond that. Yes, literally yesterday afternoon, we were doing an innovation workshop. So a co-design workshop with 4 people who had disabilities, working with the people who created a product to enable them to see how they felt about that product. And then again, it's not about just saying this is right or this is wrong, or I can use it or I can't use it, but it's actually saying, okay, the solution to that problem lies in the partnership between the person who has the disability and the person who's creating the product. And can those people work together to come up with something that is better?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with Jonathan there. I think for us personally, I mean, trying to focus on the whole WCAG is just, it's a it's a project in itself, and then a project on top of that to fix what you think you fixed before. So I think for us, it's just looking at those big areas, the big hitters, so the top 5. So for example, adding alternative text behind images where you need them, looking at your page structure and how things are on your screen and your hierarchy, contrast, they're the big ones that really make a huge impact. And then it just means that once you've concentrated and fixed those, or looked at training people in those 5 areas, that's 5 less areas that you've got to worry about the next iteration, because people understand it, they get it. If you can break it down to role specific, if your organization's big enough to do that, then I would recommend doing it.
When we speak about, okay, these are the areas that we want more people to step into. We want a lot more entrepreneurs or project managers or companies or organizations thinking about this one particular part. What are the opportunities that you see? And what would you say is that you really wished there were more people working in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think for me, the opportunities in this area are huge, really. I kind of tend to want to look at the opportunities in terms of the benefits. So we run events all of the time. We're running a webinar Thursday next week on how to persuade your boss to do accessibility, why this could be a good thing. And we've spent a huge amount of time working with all sorts of different organizations about what they've got to win from this. Why is this potentially the best thing that they could do for their company this year? Fundamentally, even startups thrive by attracting the best staff. Well, the best talent want to work for companies who are saying the right sort of things. That's why Valuable 500 have got 500 huge organizations to sign up. A key reason behind that is because they know that the best people coming out of university want to work for companies that have ethics and have good diversity and inclusion.
So here's a key tip from Jonathan that I took away. If you have to convince your boss or your project manager or somebody that you're trying to really convince that they should include the certain target group, start explaining them the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That's the win, to make yourself being heard, to start talking about the benefits that this thing could bring to your organization or to your product.
I think also as well is considering accessibility at the beginning of your project absolutely makes sense when you don't have to then go remediate all these issues with your application that are more expensive than actually just doing it right at the beginning. And also it's more confusing. So for example, there, if you have to remediate a product to make it more accessible, all of the people that have had to learn how to use that product in a specific way now will have to relearn it again once you put a fix in. And obviously getting that out is difficult. But also from a development perspective, you may have a team that come in, develop an application, and they may do it in an agile fashion where they move on to the next project. So they take that knowledge with them. Now you've got to remediate a product that actually you may have a new team on, and it's costly because you've got to get everybody involved, the right access, you've got to fix the problem, speak to people, get it through the process again, and it inevitably costs you more in the longer run than actually just, like say, doing it correct at the beginning. And I think that's the key for it.
It used to be a CSR to actually develop these services for people, and it would be like, right, okay, it's a kind of, we have to do it because it's the right thing to do. And then you relied on people within organizations who were like, it's the empaths who would be like, no, this is the right thing to do. And if you were lucky, they were in a C-level management team. But nobody can deny that the world we see on television, the world that we're experiencing, is full of adverts with disabled people in. We have products that look, the halftime advert for the last year's Super Bowl was Microsoft's Xbox controller. You don't have to go too far on your TV these days to see what 3 words all over the joint. I mean, it's there. If you have, it used to be we had to convince somebody, but now it's not just getting drip fed into them, it's everywhere. You cannot turn on, you cannot look at the BBC website without seeing something about disability and access. The other day, 2/3 of disabled people don't use shopping centres because they're worried about accessibility. You just go, well, if that's the case, well, who's shopping on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock? It's elderly, disabled people, people who are out of work, they're maybe not buying so much, but you're kind of thinking those are the people that you need to be getting to. 20% of the population are disabled people. In the UK alone, it's £249 billion a year on goods and services. And if you need to convince your boss that this is important, if you really need to convince your boss, start thinking about working for somebody else. Because if they need to be convinced about this, they're a little bit behind the times. They need to turn the TV on or have a look at social media.
Yeah, and I wanted to say exactly, yeah, I wanted to say if in 5 years I want to see I want to see a lot more leaders and a lot more CEOs and just people who are making the decisions, just making accessibility a priority. It's that simple. I mean, I think a lot of the work is just convincing your leaders, and we're actually, if we were just realize that actually we just need the leadership to say this is how we want to build our product, then that's just how it gets done. And so I would love, personally, that's my answer, I would love to see a lot more leaders making it a priority.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, as more, I would like to talk to you to the panel. I promised the attendees 1 hour of highly engaging and entertaining panel. So thank you. But before we leave, I know we also asked our attendees that following people or following influencers is the way of increasing their knowledge about the subject. So a quick summary of where can people follow you, how can they reach to you? Why don't you start, Jonathan?
Yeah, I've put so you can follow me. So at John Hassel on Twitter, Jonathan Hassel on LinkedIn. But other than that, if you can just click on the link that I've just put in the chat, then loads of people have really enjoyed my book. If you go to that link, you can get a free copy, basically. So that tries to sum up a lot of the experience that I've had trying to help organizations get good at this over time. So yeah, that's the best way of getting a hold of me.
How about you, Chris?
I think for me, I'm a little bit of a LinkedIn bod, so I like LinkedIn. So I've put my link in the chat on here. But what I also do is every other week, it's got to come back into play, but every other week I run a session called Alibi. And Gavin's been on there, which is really good, a couple of times. And what we do is very similar to today. There's no more than 10 people in the session. From all walks of life. Doesn't matter what experience you have, if you're new to accessibility or you've been around for a while. I run these events, they're around about an hour and a half long. And we just talk about, we do some introductions, and then we talk about anything and everything that's accessible and accessibility. We don't set an agenda, and we go through obviously that discussion. So by all means, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm going to be putting out a couple of invites over the next couple of days just for those sessions, and I'm hoping to bring them back. It's going to be every other week at the moment, so we'll see if it's too busy, I'll bring them back every week.
Thanks, Chris.
I would say follow these guys on all the things that are on the panel across there. Definitely follow me. I'm more than happy to chat on LinkedIn and connect on LinkedIn, and do try and get onto Chris's panel. Truth is that he's going to have to put it onto Clubhouse soon, because 10 people's not enough. This stuff needs to be talked about with hundreds of people at the same time. So maybe, is it Clubhouse is that on your horizon?
It's a little bit of both, because what I'd like to do is keep it small so that people feel comfortable to talk about it. So they're not recorded deliberately, just so that we have a really open discussion on there. But yeah, absolutely, Clubhouse, if they can bring captions in and make it more accessible, then absolutely. I think everything's already reserved.
The other thing I would do is follow Access Chat on Twitter.
Yeah.
Access Chat, hashtag Access Chat. It's a really great one every Tuesday night between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And it's amazing guests on there. It's run by Neil Milliken, Antonio Santos, and Deborah Rue. Yeah, that's it.
That's a new one for me too.
Oh yeah, the Access Chat, very good.
That's good.
Yeah, all great. Follow everything everyone said. I agree. I've put details on the chat, so if you want to,
don't forget your articles. You need to tell them about your articles, Gigi. Brilliant.
Thank you, Chris.
The LinkedIn articles.
Thank you, Chris.
Great at bigging each other up. It's brilliant.
Well, yeah, if you go on my LinkedIn, I've written a few articles from my learnings mainly, and I like what you were saying, Yushman, about sort of being an accessibility student, and that's definitely how I consider myself. And so there's a few articles there of like, what have I learned in the last few years working in accessibility, and I've got more coming. So yeah, working on those as well. Thank you.
Thanks. So I had a huge fun in the last hour. I learned a lot. There was a lot of things that I feel like I'm not alone in that area. I can resonate with a lot of stories. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done. Really good. Great.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. I'm honored to be with everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. When's the next one? I think that's what we need. We need to see more of these.
Yeah, that's something that's going to be planned And I'm going to definitely reach out to you, maybe for a fireside chat or yeah, something new, exciting that you guys are doing. We'd love to chat with you.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye-bye.